Welcome to MGoRadio 10.7. We preview the Illinois game, but that's a little bit later in the podcast because we have a special guest, Regent Jordan Acker. Hello, Jordan.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
I'm well, and of course, Seth is here. Hello, Seth.
How you doing? We were having a nice little discussion on Twitter that I figured would be better done here than the marvelous forum of democratic speech that is Twitter.
So why don't you set the stage for us, Seth?
The stage is that we heard last week that there's going to be a survey going out to Michigan fans asking us about advertising in the stadium. The survey came, and it was pretty much the exact thing that Michigan fans were fearing, right? It was hey, it asked you twice right before it even gets into the advertising question, which was a push-pull question.
Well, wait. Let's, because I did take this survey. It showed up in my box.
Yeah.
And why don't we start from there? So they issued a survey that up front asks you what your relationship is with the program, how much money you give to it, etc. And then it goes through a laundry list of different things you may or may not be interested in that other professional sporting organizations have implemented in their stadiums, like, cooler seats and bunker suites and all this kind of stuff. And then after all of that, it says, do you know about the house settlement? Do you know we're going to have to give people money? And then the final question is, rank these ways in which we need to extract more money from you. The context of the survey is not like, well, we might do this if we feel we need to. It's like, how would you like to be further milked? Right. So, but you guys are having a conversation about this on Twitter. Let me let you continue that conversation after so rudely interrupting.
No. That was fine. And I appreciate
Brian is like the people in the mentions who were yelling at me. So
I'm not yelling at anyone, but it was there was a certain tone to the survey, which is ostensibly asking questions to you, but it's also delivering answers that you don't necessarily want to hear if you're a bit of a stick in the mud, which I have been accused of being. So let's look at the big picture. So Michigan has a $210 million athletic department in terms of annual revenue. The house settlement will not require, but allow the athletic department to share revenue up to about $22 million with the athletes in the department. And there are various athletic departments around the country who are responding to this by saying, we need more money. And I believe LSU is putting a surcharge on tickets. There's just various situations in which the athletic departments in question are like, okay, we give us more money. And I think a lot of other college football fans find this off-putting, because at the same time Michigan is saying, okay, we need more money, they are getting more money. They're getting it from a new television contract that radically increases the amount that the Big Ten is going to distribute to them every year. And instead of saying, okay, we'll pay the players outside of that, we're getting a survey that is implying that whatever money that Michigan has is not enough. And the thing about that that really rankles is it's not like the things that money will go to are going to directly impact the people who I think most Michigan fans care about the most, which are the players. The amount of money that Michigan itself can give to the players is capped by the house settlement. And
for now, sure.
For now. And as more money goes into the athletic department, less of that money is available to slosh around and actually give to the players in form of collectives and NIL and all that stuff. So for me, I read this and I took this survey and I was extremely distressed by the direction of the athletic department. And now guess I'm going to let someone else talk.
Well, Brian, and I think it's look, I think it's a fair point. What I would say about it is this, is that I think what you're saying is absolutely part of the equation, but it's not the whole equation. And the whole equation is that, well, I agree with you, and I hear that Michigan fans want money going to players, and I certainly do. I've been very public about this for a long time. What I also would say is that there's other things that we, as an athletic department, we need to have our athletic department pay for, in my view. We want to add women's hockey. Okay, that's the first thing. There are buildings like Cliff Keen Arena, for example, which have simply aged out their usefulness. We can't host regional hockey games anymore because we don't have enough locker rooms to host it. That's what the NCAA tells us these days. Is that we have one locker room at Yost. We need 4 in order to host NCAA regionals. So that's one side of it. The other side of this is this idea and understanding that the university has endless resources. When it comes to athletics, it's just not true. And part of the reason why it's not true is twofold. First, because the athletic department is one of only a few in the country. In fact, I think maybe the only at this point that pays main campus for its scholarships. So every scholarship athlete that we have, a check is written from the athletic department to main campus for that tuition. That's the two things. And the third part is that we're one of 12 athletic departments that are self-sustaining, meaning that we do not take a penny from main campus to fund anything on the athletic campus. And this was a change. Remember, during COVID, there was a loan, and that was for the first time ever from main campus to athletics in order to allow to get through that year and a half. So I think these things they're not just one, it's all of these things that have put the athletic department in this position. And I think you're right in some sense. I think we need to look at how do we fix all of these, but part of it is certainly a mentality where we do not, and I certainly do not, want to be taking money out of the endowment, for example, to keep costs down for our football fans. Look, the reality is that money goes to scholarships, right? That money goes to academic programs, and we're not going to be doing it to artificially lower ticket prices. The flip side of that is that I do not expect the House settlement to cap what that revenue sharing is going to be. And I expect that number may be 20 million in year 1. I think by year 2 or 3 or 5, it might be an enormous share of revenue. I think in the NFL, it's like 47%, 48% has to go to player salaries. I wouldn't be shocked if we got there at the end of the day too. But the other thing that I would say is, and Seth said this to me, that there's been an enormous, this has been part of our Twitter conversation, there's an enormous disconnect that's been growing over the past 20 years between our student athletes, between the fans. And Michigan was enormously lucky, especially last year, because there was a strong bond. The players had stayed, right? And these things come with the transfer portal. They come with NIL payments. They come with all of the things that we've been talking about that have changed college sports, that frankly caused Tony Bennett to decide this morning that he was done coaching. These are all parts of the things that fans have had to endure. And I think that there's a certain reasonableness to it, but it doesn't solve the ultimate problem, which is if we want to be in a position 3 or 5 or 7 years from now where football fans get the best quarterbacks, the best coaches, and have chances to win national championships in the playoff era, we're going to have to raise revenue, or we're going to decide that, like LSU does, where main campus funds go towards the athletic department. And I'm not sure that Michigan football fans, especially our season ticket holders, would prefer that. I'm not sure that's the best thing for the university as a whole.
I think that a lot of the fans, when you really try to understand where we're at, there's been a lot of discussion in the last, especially the last few years, between two groups of stakeholders, the universities and the players, right? That's where the argument's been happening. And the answer that both of these stakeholders have come up with is, well, the fans will pay for it, right? And they're paying for it through the current landscape, the media landscape right now is terrible for fans, right? And part of that is determining, like, we're playing Indiana at 7:30 at night. I have to get a subscription to all sorts of different services just to watch my team. So it feels like we're paying a lot of the money that's being generated from us, right? Because that's us giving up more of our Saturdays. That's us paying more in fees and whatnot. Feels like those are just going to TV executives and companies and their shareholders who don't have like, why are those guys being taken care of and we're being raked over? Our response, the belief that we had was, okay, look, they're doing all that. They're breaking our conferences. They're going through all these changes, but at least they're going to have the money to pay the players from that, right? We're going to blow up the Big Ten. We're going to add all this, but at least they're going to have incrementally more money. $12.5 million, I think, was the addition, the increase in payout this year. Because of that, we're like, okay, at least they're halfway to paying their players right there. When we look at the way that the university's been set up before this happened, it was there's a general sense, and this is what I think that the administrators need to hear from the fans right now, that Michigan's going to take every penny from us that they can, that they've already been wringing us out to the maximum amount. We were wrung out over Dave Brandon, and you saw that there was a major campus revolt over the things that were going on because there's a cheapening of the product at the same time that that we're being asked to pay more and more and more. So when you say, hey, should we raise ticket prices 10 to 15% more to cover this? We're like, you're going to raise ticket prices to exactly the amount that we'll pay, no matter what. It's not like that. So earmarking these things.
Well, that's the free market. I think that there's some truth to that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the free market.
Yeah. All right. But this is not a public corporation being run for the next quarterly shareholder report, right?
Right.
I mean, but it's being run like that. Absolutely. There's absolutely no thought to the fact that, you know what? I didn't go to the Texas game this year because I had COVID. So I didn't go. And you know what? I didn't mind not going. And that is from a person who has turned his entire life into following Michigan football. When the commercials came on, I just muted them. I didn't have to go buy a $10 soft drink. You know, like the value proposition of going to a football game has been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And what I'm hearing from the athletic department is it needs to get worse and worse and worse and worse so that we can have a successful team.
So this doesn't just turn into a struggle session because I feel like we're going that way. I think this is a really important thing that I'm glad to hear this. And I think it's important also to frame it in this way too, Brian, because I think this is actually part of it. Over the last 25 years, we have professionalized every other part of college athletics. We have. Okay. You know, Seth and I were talking about what it was like going to the stadium in the late 90s. You know, the only information you got about the players was in those cheap paper things that you got as you turned out towards campus. There was no replay screens. Certainly Wi-Fi, that didn't even exist at that point.
Still
but since then,
yeah, that's a bad example.
fair point. No, you're absolutely right about it. No Wi-Fi, no cell service. It's old school in one way. It's something, by the way, that needs to get fixed.
All right, but we always hear that stuff, and what we never actually see from this athletic department is any movement to improve anything for the fans. It's all about extraction, period. There has not been one thing that Ward Manual has done that has improved anything in terms of a fan experience. The prices keep going up, the product keeps getting worse. Period. And if you've been in the stands, I think you may have felt that.
And I have, sure. Yeah, and I think that, you know, look, am I going to defend the commercial breaks being longer? I mean, 3.5 minutes? Of course not. It's indefensible. It takes away from the spirit of the experience. There's no question about that. But what I would say is that I look at this as a consequence of everything that's happened over the last 20 years and not, the athletic department is trying to screw me again. Well, I think it's the next thing that's happening here, which is, of course, was going to happen from the moment that the judge ruled that we were going to have to start paying players. Of course it was going to happen. And Brian, what I would say is, here's the only thing I would disagree with that. And you're talking about the fan experience. Part of the fan experience is winning a lot of football games over the last few years. Okay, and that came from, by the way, we could say whatever we want, but that comes from the university having the best facilities. In fact, probably better than a lot of NFL teams when it comes to locker rooms, when it comes to our practice facilities. I mean, to the point where they were talking about our practice facilities and the quality of our locker room on the Howard Stern show a few weeks ago. I mean, this is where we are, but this was an arms race of the last decade was on facilities, right? And now we're at the next arms race. And part of this is just simply the continuing professionalization of what was already happening.
I think what we're trying to say, though, is you guys... the money has gone to facilities. Sorry, Brian. Let me say this real quick. The money went to facilities, right? The money went into salaries. You know, I have the 2020 FY budget in front of me, which is a lot of 2019, right? And the 40% of the budget at that point, the budget was about $200 million at that point, and $75 million went to salaries. So we understand that the money went to paying coaches and money went to paying for facilities. Why? Because you couldn't pay the players, so you had to get them here somehow. You had to give them some sort of proposition. So we got them better shoes, we got them better coaches, we got them better facilities. We've upgraded and we're going to keep doing that because that's the arms race. Well, we're saying, look, you were taking as much money from us as possible before you had to pay the labor. And now that you can pay the labor, now that that's part of the value proposition.
And we all agree you should.
Yeah. And we are also, don't forget, like the university itself is competing with itself because we're also donating to the university. At least I personally am. And I'm also personally donating to the funds for the players, right? Like and we've been asked to cover that too. So it's not just, so our donations are not just athletics. But what we're seeing is that they took as much money from us as possible and put it into buildings and coaching salaries. And what we're not seeing is a pullback. Especially in this survey, there was nothing in there that was saying, what can we spend less on? And it seems to be this idea, and I'm hearing it from you here too. Maybe you can speak to this, but it seems like there's no interest whatsoever in taking less. And when you look at the value proposition of last year's team and why we like this team so much, Mason Graham took less to be at Michigan, right? J.J. McCarthy was willing to take less to be at Michigan. Part of the thing that we've always talked about with this program, it differentiates us from Ohio State and a lot of others, is we are willing to take less because this place is better. And what we didn't see from the athletic department is any kind of that sentiment that we're willing to take something too.
Yeah. So what? And I think those are all fair points. But what I would say, and this is the turnaround to it, is that I consider, as much as I love Michigan football, and you guys know I do, I consider all of our sports to be important. Okay. And right now, one of the sports that I consider to be really important is women's ice hockey. And I know how expensive that's going to be. It's not cheap. I'd say this for a while, we're going to have to build a second sheet of ice, for example, somewhere on campus, right? And so I think that the problem is that you can go down this path and you can go down the SEC path, but look how many sports these Southern schools support, right? It's 16 at Auburn. It's 18 at Alabama. Okay. At Michigan, we're talking about 32. And we're talking about no student fees. And we're talking about cheap student tickets. And we're talking about trying to compete with a school that has half the sports that we do. Right. And that to me is the central problem is, look, if you believe as I do, what I would say is that we would never have this conversation about about musical theater to say, well, musical theater needs to be self-sustaining. That's ridiculous, right? We don't say the English department of LS&A needs to be self-sustaining. We do require that for the athletic department. So until the university, as a whole makes a decision that these programs are so important that we can fund them for main campus, we're going to be in the same position. And it's part of it is just the unique position that Michigan is in this space. It's just a reality.
The thing is that Michigan was already in that position, right? Like nothing about this has changed. Like they were already in that position with more sports. They were already in that position with paying full scholarships to the university, and they've been succeeding in that situation. And nothing about that has changed. And all these other schools are already doing all of the stuff that was listed in this survey, and they're making less money than Michigan. Penn State, $30 million less than Michigan. Texas A&M, $20 million less. Florida, $30 million less. LSU, right. Georgia, $10 million less. And what I don't see in that survey is any acknowledgement that Michigan is different from any of these other places. Like Dave Brandon could have issued that survey, because what it did is it looked at various pro sports things that are happening right now, and it was like, let's follow these guys. Let's do what they're doing. What I didn't see is I didn't see an iota of evidence that anything unique about Michigan was being considered. What I didn't see is I didn't see any evidence that we could replace our athletic director with any MBA from anywhere in America and anything would be at all different. Right? Like, this is a place where if you want to have a women's hockey program, you can probably ask the Michigan money cannon and you can get a lot of the way there. But we're not going to do that, are we? Because that's not what an MBA would do. Like, the depressing thing about this is that, you know, we're leaders in best, right? Well, not this survey and not this athletic department. It's just like, what can we do that's like the NBA? What can we do that's like the NFL? There's no ideas in this document. There's no idea.
Here's what I'll say about that, is that you may think that things are decided, but they're not, right? This is enormously early in the process. We as a board just learned about this a couple of weeks ago, that this was where they were going to go. And we need to at least understand where the market is. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, but look, we can also react to it. And I just want you to know, to both of you and to all of the people who have been tweeting at me all morning, and frankly, since I tweeted at Seth yesterday about this, that I'm not surprised necessarily by the reaction of the fan base. But I think it's something that the administrators need to hear. And I'm frankly glad that we did this interview, simply because I think it's good for me to hear it as well, and to hear it now in front of all the people who are listening to this, because it's a fair. You're raising nothing unfair here. The only thing I would say about women's hockey is that it's actually way more expensive than anyone realizes in terms of the construction costs and the program costs per year. And that's adding another sport. And that's not going to make up the difference, obviously. I mean, we know that's just not. But look, I hear you, and I want to just say that we have to look at these from all angles on this. I think you're right on this point, but I think at the same time, you know, the idea that main campus is going to fund it is a difficult one to swallow.
I don't think
as
that's
a
what
region.
people are saying here.
Nobody is suggesting that, but also the accounting fiction of we're paying for these scholarships with full out-of-state tuition when that's not the cost that the university bears. I mean, that's something you need to look at, right? Because the cost of having a student on campus is not the tuition, full freight out-of-state tuition that a lot of these players are paying back to main campus, right? That's just that's an old-fashioned way to hide the fact that Michigan's athletic department used to be wildly profitable, right? So you transfer it all back.
At points it has been,
at maximum cost, and it's like, oh, we just broke even this year. That's an accounting fiction, right? I don't buy that.
And so is the transfer, by the way. There's a transfer that happens of funds every year to main campus on top of the scholarships. It's been going on for about 20 years. Right. This is public data too, by the way. This is not, you know, something we didn't.
I brought my
USC, the Mercy Coleman thing.
I brought my USC fan buddy, one of my best friends that I grew up with, and he went to USC and loves USC. And he had a really tough day at the end of that game, right? But I brought him, and so we walked past Ocker Field, and he sees it, and he's like, you know, everyone who walks by that is like, this is quite a palace that we've built for, you know, a non-revenue for an Olympic sport. And I go, yeah, when I'll explain, you know, this is an important thing to us, right? It's important for Michigan to have these things. But also, the reason we can afford it is because the university could not stop making a profit and had to spend it on something. And so this is what we spent it on. And we got used to spending on that, and now we don't want to lose those kinds of things. In fact, we want more. I get that. We all get that. We get that there were things we've been spending because the university was bloated. But he walks into that stadium with me, okay? And he looks around, and after 5 minutes, he says, "There's something different going on here. I can't put my finger on it." And I'm like, "You're not seeing any advertising, are you?" And then after the game, after he just got his gut pulled out of his stomach, right? He turns to me and says, "That was the best college football experience I've ever had, even with the loss, because that stadium is just a big round bowl full of people and football." He's never been to the Rose Bowl, and I'm like, it's kind of like that there too. But like, man, this is unique. This is something that we have that we've been able to, just because every time they talk about it, we go bloody nuts. And I think that the university needs to understand why we go bloody nuts. When we walk into that stadium, we've been advertised all day, all entire lives, even on our site, right? But our site's a free proposition. You have all these people yelling at you all the time that they want your money, they want your funds, whatever. You walk into that stadium, It's football and all of us. And we want more of that. We want to turn the noise off for a moment and let us sit there and appreciate this, because when someone who walks into that stadium who's been experiencing any other college football, and USC is experiencing quite a lot of college football, they get it. They feel it. I think that if you're up in the box and you're closed off and you're not in that stadium all the time, if you're that MBA guy, you're not going to understand what the value is, and that's what we're caring about.
Yeah, and I the thing I would add to you, and I think this is an important thing, it's something I've been thinking about a lot when it came to this, because as you know, we talked about this in 2020 when there were going to be no fans in the stands, putting an advertisement of some kind over a tarp.
Mm-hmm.
Something, a Nike logo or something. And it ended up not making financial sense to do so. But I think about it a lot in terms of baseball. Okay. And if either one of you have been to Fenway or to Wrigley over the past decade, the experience has changed significantly in both, but it's changed far more significantly at Wrigley Field than it has at Fenway. And part of the reason, part of, the thing that I want to think about more, and frankly, I've had these conversations, is the Fenway Sports Group is remarkable at maximizing revenue that is not actually interfering with the enjoyment of the game. So the whole concept of seats on top of the monster is one of them. But there's also, I did not know this until the last time I was there, there's actually a bar in left field that they literally open up a thing. It's from the 1940s that they renovated, and you don't know that, and it's a revenue driver. They have something that we don't have, and frankly, something that I'd like to see is their football or their baseball museum is a restaurant, actually, that is sitting behind Fenway Park, and they charge $20 admission, and you can go in and see the bases that was stolen into the 2004 World Series, and you could see all of those sorts of things. And yes, there's significant. Look, it's baseball. There's obviously significant advertising in the park, but I also think that when you're doing this stuff, and I've said this for a long time, that you need to maximize the revenue in a way from everything else first, too, in a way that respects your tradition. And for us, one of my most frustrating things about this is you go to a football game and usually the museum is closed, right? Have you guys been to the museum, by the way? Have you walked through that?
Yes. Well, but me personally, because
cool.
I was part of the
it's cool
group. Yeah,
it's cool. There, and when I think about this, I didn't see one of the options on there, and I'm just throwing this out there for your, thinking about this. Move the football museum to the parking lot, charge $20 admission on game days, and let people walk through it. Because would people pay for that? Absolutely, they would. Would it give something an experience they don't get anywhere else? Of course it would. Would it change your game day experience in a negative way? I don't think so. And the fact that most of our fans have never seen that is another reason to do it. But I think this is important, and I'm glad that we've kicked off this conversation because it actually is a conversation at the end of the day. Look, my mentor on this board, Larry Deitch, was the one who rejected fireworks in the stadium. Was that in 2012? That was another Brandon era one. And what he said to me, and I believe, is that the board is the keepers of the flame, and we need to hear this stuff. We do, because this is an important part of what is the front door of the university. And it doesn't mean we don't have to still maximize revenue. So I guess I'm going to ask the question back to you. Suppose that I told you need to plug a $20 to $50 million hole to get us to where would you be? What would you, Seth? What would you, Brian, say? How would you get it there?
I would start by saying I'd have every one of our coaches, one at a time, announce that they're taking a pay cut. So
that's a little far.
You're asking where I would go first, who I would go and ask first.
Okay.
I would. That's who.
Okay,
that's
sure.
Because to be honest, I know how college football works, and I know that because I lots of friends who are insiders at other programs, and I know that one of the reasons these salaries ballooned in the first place is the coaches were getting money to pay their players. Right? That no one paid Tosh $1 million at Alabama because he was worth $1 million. It was a way to get $750,000 to Alabama players, right? So
sure.
I think that some of the bloat that we've created in the past, that's where we got to look at. Where were we putting money because we had to get rid of money? Salaries are one of them. Some of the building projects were some of those too. And I think that you have to be noisy about what you do. The second thing is I would look at new ways of generating money that people aren't thinking about. You mentioned women's hockey. There is a huge gap right now in college hockey in putting it on TV. It's very hard for anyone to get these things. You have to go through the Big Ten. You end up with a horrible thing. It's not that hard for Michigan, who has a TV productions department, who's been in the media business for 100 years, to create their own media, put these games out on MGoBlue.com, sell the advertising, and have a presenting sponsor of women's hockey.
But we don't have the rights to that anymore, Seth.
Right.
That's granted rights have been given to the conference.
All right.
So that's where I would go. I would start asking for these things back that don't mean much to the conference, and you ask where I'd go. I'm like, these are the soft spots. Yeah.
Historically, the transfer to the main campus has been something between $10 and $15 million. I would claw that back. I would change the payment of scholarships to actual cost of attendance for the university instead of making it up and charging out-of-state people full freight, even when in financial situations they would not be paying that in any way whatsoever. That gets you maybe halfway there. The other things that come to mind is that when we're going to name something, let's not just name it after a random rich person. Let's have a GoFundMe. And you can put your money where your mouth is. Is this going to be the JJ Tunnel or is it going to be the Quorum Tunnel? I don't know. It's up to you, the fans. And the other thing is, I want to be able to pay so that the person who does the piped in music at Yoast doesn't do that. I will give money to the university so that I don't have to hear Cotton Eye Joe at Yoast. I mean, that's
My
a
kids
$1 billion
love Cotton Eye
idea
Joe,
right
Brian.
there. Well, I'm about to say something rude about your children. Which I've decided not
Haven't you
do.
done enough to the Ackers? I mean, come on, Brian.
Well, hey, whoa. All right.
9.
But so there are ways. And, I'm not going to have all the ways. But the thing that really depressed me about this document is it didn't really seem to understand anything other than what other people have done at professional sporting events. And I would like to keep some distinction, right? Like, I think a lot of the reason that Michigan is able to have more money than Penn State, more money than all these existing programs, is the fan base and the loyalty of the fan base. And we know that when we point the Michigan money cannon somewhere, it fires. And there are ways to do this that are inclusive of the fan base instead of just piling more crap on them and continually catering to only the richest among us. And it's just... I would like to see something out of the athletic department that I would feel is uniquely Michigan instead of just day after day of it could be literally anyone running this and exactly the same things would be happening. Thank you for coming on. We've talked to you for 45 minutes and we have to preview Illinois now.
Woo! Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. It was a little
Yep.
contentious, but I really appreciate you being willing to do this.
Yeah, we're glad that you're here.
And these are important. Look, these are important discussions because the point you made about 20 minutes ago is right, Brian. This is a public university that belongs to the people of this state, and we need to hear this if it's going to remain that way. And this is, as our front door, we got to keep it that way. So thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Seth, for drawing me back on Twitter.
Yeah. All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
Mullings dragging Trojans, broke free. Mullings dragging Trojans, dragging Trojans, dragging Trojans.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Learn how to retire with peak confidence at peakwm.com/mgoblog. A lot of people don't realize we have a special arrangement with the University 401, 403, 457 retirement plan. If you're a university employee or even a former university employee, you can add us as your advisor to your account. And my bet is that we can help you optimize your situation, especially when it comes to taking advantage of the mega backdoor Roth option with the 457. If you're highly compensated, I can show you a way to contribute over $60,000 per year to the university plan.
Mullings dragging Trojans, broke free. Mullings in the clear. It's a foot race. He'll get tracked down, but he comes up with the biggest play of the day.
Need help with insurance? Well, longtime MGoBlog supporter Owen Rosen is back at his new insurance brokerage, Royal Oath Insurance Group. Owen might not be the knowledge, but he and his team have the life, business, car, and home insurance knowledge you need. Based in Michigan, but they can also help in other states too, you can call or text Owen today at 586-229-1026 or visit Royal Oath, that's OATH, insurance.com.
Hi, this is Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. You've probably noticed that we are terrible about keeping our podcast advertisements up to date and topical to Michigan sports, probably because we're so busy doing preventative maintenance for all of our many happy customers. We know no one is excited to call their HVAC contractor, and to make that a rare occurrence, you should regularly maintenance your system. Call us or text us to find out more about the benefits of our preventative maintenance plans, including savings on service calls and priority scheduling. Whatever the season, we want you to be comfortable for that next glorious Michigan victory.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Welcome to MGoRadio 10.7. We welcome
Six.
in six.
Yeah, I think it's 6, isn't it? Are we on 6?
I'm just going to dwell on this for the rest of the podcast. I got it wrong for the first time ever.
Uh-huh.
Alex, how you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty
All
good.
right,
Talk
good.
some Illini.
Let's talk some Bort. I've decided that Bert is passe, and we're going to call him Bort. Nobody likes that. Okay. Illinois is 5-1. They beat Kansas, then ranked. They beat Nebraska, then ranked. Kansas is now 1-5. Nebraska's pretty good. They're coming off a 50-49 victory over Purdue that had the lowest win expectancy of any win last week. But they are 5-1. Luke Altmaier has turned the corner, and their defense is extant. It's there. Which one do you want to start with there, Alex?
Let's go offense first.
All right, so the offense, they're not going to have their starting running back, Caden Fegan. So they're going to go with Josh McCray, who played a significant amount as a freshman, but had 2 injury-riddled years to follow that up with. And honestly, from what I've seen of both guys, I like McCray better for this matchup than Fegan.
Yeah, well, Fegan is like a fast guy, right? He's
he's Brandon Minor. He's a straight-ahead tank.
Yeah, he was on the freaks list. He's got a lot of natural traits, but the question for the running game is how much space are they going to get? And when you look at this Illinois offense, their better results have come in games where they can run the ball pretty consistently. Games where they haven't been able to, the offense is kind of ground to a halt. And I'm not a huge fan of this offensive line, and they're going to have their work cut out for them going up against Michigan's defensive front. They aren't awful, but they just don't get a ton of push against, decent competition. And I don't particularly feel super optimistic that will be the case in this game.
Yeah, so a couple things jumped out when I was going over their stats and their games, is that both you and Pro Football Focus were just like, oh, these guys are just there on the offensive line. Like, they all got 60s-ish, which is their baseline. If you play one play and you do nothing, you get a 60 at Pro Football Focus. And no one got a cyan on your FIFO film, but you said that they were closer to that than stars.
Yeah, I think that's the way to put it. Zy Chrysler did get one, but he's been demoted out of the starting lineup. They're bringing in Brandon Henderson to start at right guard. He was the bonus OL in the game I charted against Nebraska. He was wearing number 94, and he caught a tackle-eligible touchdown. Now he's starting at right guard. That's a matchup to watch against either Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant. And the tackles are also matchups to watch. And, shifting to the other part of the line in terms of pass protection, those two guys really struggled against Penn State. They had pass pro grades in the 30s, J.C. Davis, the left tackle, and Melvin Priestley, the right tackle. So obviously something to watch when they go up against Josiah Stewart and, Derek Moore, TJ Guy, etc.
Yeah, so their Pro Football Focus grades for offensive line grading are like, oh, pretty good. Penn State. Pretty good. And it kind of feels like this should be another Penn State for Michigan, because I was looking these various things up. Illinois is 93rd in their pass protection rankings. Michigan is number 1 in pass rush by a full 5 points. So Penn State is 8th. They're good, but Josiah Stewart has been perhaps the most consistent edge in the country in terms of getting pressure. They have the 2 guys on the inside. And for Michigan, it's often been a story of, can we get off the field? And this looks like a situation where they should be able to get off the field fairly consistently. Because one thing about Altmaier is he's massively improved this year, but he has one of the biggest drop-offs in terms of Pro Football Focus grading and when he gets pressured that I've ever seen. He goes from a 91 to a 44. And Penn State pressured him on 60% of his dropbacks. So if Michigan can replicate that, or even come close to it, this feels like an offense that's going to be in long yardage situations, because they're not going to be able to run themselves into 3rd and 4. And then at some point, the walls are going to cave in.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. We should talk for a minute about what this offense does well, and that does start with Altmaier. He was a guy I was not very high on coming into the season. He transfers into from Ole Miss last season, which is essentially a down transfer. Certainly Illinois lower on the college football ladder. And then he doesn't have a great first year, gets benched late in the season for John Paddock, who came in, and Illinois' offense took off at the end of last year. And then Paddock runs out of eligibility, so they have to go back to Altmaier. And he's really taken some big steps, and you got to give him credit for that. His interceptions have fallen dramatically, I believe, from 10 to 1. He's thrown as many touchdowns as he did all of last year in just 6 games so far. Completion rate is up, yards per attempt is up, and as you mentioned, when you give him time, he looks pretty good. Like, this is a guy that last couple of years would have been one of the better quarterbacks that we faced. Not saying a lot, but that's not something I expected to say about Luke Altmaier. So you definitely need to get some pressure, because against Penn State, he starts getting sped up. He ends up throwing his 1 interception of the year in that game. It was pretty rough. He just missed a linebacker under the middle there, steps in front of the route, picks it off. Would have been a pick six if not for a completely stupid block in the back that was unrelated to the return. But that's what you got to do to him, because if you give him time, he has good chemistry with his receivers, who are the other thing to mention. Pat Bryant's made big strides for Illinois. Last year, he was the third receiver behind Isaiah Williams, who was really the star, and then Casey Washington. But Bryant now is a legitimate player. 6'3", he's got contested catch ability. That's somebody to watch. And Zachary Franklin on the other side is pretty solid too. What they're lacking is slot and tight end, where they just don't have big-time talent at those spots. But receiver and quarterback, if you give them time, they can cook a little bit. And again, that's not something I expected to say.
And Michigan has had issues with integrity in their coverages when they do blitz. So there's a situation here where it's like, oh, Luke Altmaier is terrible when he's pressured, except now because there's this guy who's wide open in front of his face and he's getting pressure and it doesn't matter. So Michigan's kind of deficiencies this year might mitigate the vibe that I issued previously when I was like, these guys aren't going to do anything.
Yeah. There are 2 points I wanted to bring up. First of all, Tanner Arkin is their main tight end. They'll bring in a second one too. Both of them are transfers, but Arkin is interesting because he's kind of they use him in pass block a lot, and they like to run off the tight ends a lot, which I think is one of the reasons they don't have a lot of scores for their offensive line. They're a lot more like last year's Michigan team, where like they want to run off tight end. And Arkin is that guy who, we're talking about this team that sometimes they can run, sometimes they can't. He has a ceiling. And I think that where Illinois is running up against their offensive ceiling is whether they can move guys out of the way with him or if he gets beat in. And I think that that Josiah Stewart versus Tanner Arkin matchup is where Michigan can win a lot of battles here. And then, as you mentioned, that's going to be a major talking point when we get into the UFR segment of this too, is that Michigan has had a bye week, and the main thing they have to clean up is that the first read of the quarterback when they blitz is always open. And it's a very stupid thing to be wrong. I don't understand why that's but it also seems like a thing that they can clean up rather easily, especially with a bye week to kind of reset and see what their problems are. So, and they even cleaned it up a lot in the second half of the Washington game. I don't want to get too much into that, but all you do is bring down Jair Hill, announce to everybody that they're playing man, and it was fine, right? Like it's one of those things when Michigan, when they're playing a team they didn't respect in the past, they would play off coverage until they got beaten by it. And now that you have to take every single game seriously, maybe they have to just kind of play defense based off of who they're against.
All right, that about covers the Illinois offense. Let's take a break, come back, talk about their defense.
This is the University of Michigan.
Stay tuned for Gus, but first, it's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with peak confidence. Learn more at peakwm.com/mgoblog. Oftentimes, people will ask me exactly what do we do here at Peak Wealth? Well, you already know we make killer spreadsheets. You already know my voice kind of sucks for radio, but you might not know that we approach Roth conversion.
Enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Also, one more thing you might want to know what we don't do. We don't go on Netflix dressed up like morons and hide from the camera like Brohio. Gus, what's the down and distance?
3rd and 5. Stroud in trouble. Stroud is sacked again.
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better.
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to Those Who Stay, UofM.com. Again, that is Those Who Stay, UofM.com to support. Go Blue.
Frustrated with your current e-commerce agency? Then it's time to meet Human Element, a digital marketing and web development agency with 20 years of experience building B2B and B2C websites. See us as an extension of your team, accessible, responsive, and strategic. We work with you to understand your goals so that we can build something that drives revenue and delights your customers. So if you're looking for an agency that acts as a true partner in your e-commerce business, visit human-element.com/partner. We can't wait to work with you.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.6. We'd like to thank our sponsors. First, we'd like to thank Underground Printing. Paleontologists now believe that Rishi and Ryan began supporting MGo blog sometime in the late Pleistocene. Gear up. You can't just drop that word in the middle of a read I've never seen before. Right? That's completely like Cretaceous.
This is a very professional podcast.
You can't, like, I didn't even know you would updated it, okay? And I'm reading it, I'm like, this is different now. And now I got to the what is it?
Pleistocene.
Pleistocene.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I've never heard that word pronounced. You're right. It just, but okay.
All right.
That's what, anyway, gear up at UGPMichiganApparel.com or check out our selection at MGoBlogstore.com. which now has a shirt with a guy chilling under a goalpost. We'd also like to thank our associate sponsors, Peak Wealth Management, Realtor and Lender Matt Demarest, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Royal Oath Insurance Group, Michigan Law Grad, Venue by 4M, Winewood Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Champion Circle, The Autograph, Fandom Rewarded App, and Signal Wire, where we are recording this now. We'd also like to thank King Lynxx for the interstitial music. All right, the Illinois defense is also, like the offensive line, composed largely of just guys. The thing that really jumped out is, aside from a game against Nebraska where they did a decent job, they have been crushed on the ground by every FBS foe they've faced, culminating in a 7.3 yards per carry performance for the Purdue Boilermakers in their last outing. Alex?
Yeah, it's been an issue for Illinois all year. Illinois is still mostly running the defense they did 2 years ago. Last time we saw them, they still got that 5-man front with the 3 kind of defensive tackles / like strong side edge type players, and then the 2 stand-up sort of outside linebacker guys. They're still running a lot of man coverage. They still got a deep safety that some of the time is off the screen. He's playing so deep. Like, it's conceptually the same thing, but the personnel itself has changed a lot. The defense we played 2 years ago against Illinois was really talented. They had day 1 / day 2 NFL draft picks at corner, at safety, at defensive line. This group just doesn't seem to have those caliber of guys, and it definitely stands out on the defensive line, where you had the defensive line we played last time around. They were one of the best in terms of stopping Michigan's run game. That gave Michigan problems when they had Keith Randolph, Jerjon Newton, a few other players on that line. This front just doesn't really have that. The nose tackle, T.Y. Edwards, is okay. Like Gabe Jacas, one of the other defensive edge / tackle kind of guys, is fine. Seth Coleman's been around. He's okay. But they're just not impact players. And when you have a defensive front that can get pushed around a bit, then you're playing 5-1, 5-2. Your linebackers aren't that great at sort of knowing where to be. You can give up chunks pretty quickly. And you give up enough of those, your yards per carry looks pretty rough. And that's kind of been the story in a lot of their games this year. And that seems to be a somewhat favorable matchup for Michigan going into this game.
Yeah, and Jack Tuttle is set to start, so Michigan will start its 3rd different quarterback this season. They are amongst the worst teams in America in terms of pass efficiency. I think they're 131st in EPA per pass. There's only 134 teams. The Illinois pass defense is just guys. Their pass rush is average. Their pass coverage is average, according to Pro Football Focus. There's not really anybody on this defense who stands out as particularly good or particularly bad. They're just there.
Yeah, Xavier Scott, the corner, they got him back from injury. I think he's probably their best guy. Okay. I mean, Michigan can avoid throwing at him. Sure, we've been avoiding throwing a lot, so it's fine. What I like about this is you do have the potential to exploit some matchups here, because if they're playing a lot of man coverage, in theory, you have Colston Loveland. You have Donovan Edwards. These guys should be mismatches when they are on linebackers. And Ryan Mead in particular is a pretty weak spot in coverage. Their box safety, Matthew Bailey, is a guy I think you can exploit some matchups with. That's what you got to look for. And you watch Purdue, they get a touchdown thrown to Devin Mockabee on a wheel route against Ryan Mead, and it's like, do this. Do this. This is what you should be looking for in this game. And Purdue's tight end, Max Clare, goes for, I think, 133 yards in that game as well. Like, there are opportunities here. And I think they're playing a little bit more zone than we saw last time. Last time around, they were really only doing it when they dropped 8. This time, they're doing it more when they're rushing 4 or 5. It doesn't look very good to me. It's kind of porous over the middle. Like, that's an opportunity I would look for. So I think there are some areas here to take advantage of in the passing game if Michigan can do it. And you got, you'd like to think that Tuttle is as healthy as he's ever been, and they should be able to give him some protection. Not probably great, but this isn't a great pass rushing outfit either. Like, I think Michigan has opportunities to match up decently well against this defense.
I mean, it still feels like this is, given their results on the ground, that Michigan is going to be a run first, run second, and then see what happens team. And I'm not disputing that that's exactly what they should do, but I don't feel like they're going to be getting particularly frisky.
Until they show they can stop it, run it. And I would say that we've seen Jack Tuttle a little bit be able to run the ball in his time when he's played. I think he did his own read last time against Washington. We saw him scramble some when he got injured last year against UNLV. And I think that's something you can build in as well. Like, I've watched Nebraska, I've watched Penn State, I think Purdue as well. Everybody that's run zone reads against this team have been able to do it really well. Like, the edge just crashes down, you pull it, boom, quarterback free 5 yards. Like, that's something I'd look to pepper in. Some scrambles as well. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be spying Jack Tuttle, and you're playing a man coverage team. If you got some room to run, the defense are probably going to have their backs turned chasing the receivers, pick some yards up there. Like, there's opportunities, but definitely keeping it on the ground. And I feel like it's a litmus test of sorts for Michigan's offensive line, because we've seen this Illinois team play other teams, and Michigan should be able to get some big wins on the ground. And it shouldn't be an all-out assault in pass rush, because they don't really have any guys that really terrify you in that phase. So if Michigan's struggling on the ground, if they're struggling in pass protection, I would say that's a pretty bad sign.
Anything else that we have yet to get to? For Seth or Alex?
Yeah, I want to talk about the construction of this defense. And the thing I'm most worried about, and we saw this in 2022 when we played them, Illinois is going to get their guys downhill. They're going to try to take away the run first and make you pass. And that's what this whole defense is made to do. He mentioned those edges, right? Both of them outside linebackers, right? Alec Bryant and Seth Coleman. They're both 250-pound guys. They're not super athletic, and the way you can beat them is zone reads, because they're not really going to, they try to shuffle a little bit, and they're going to get out-athleted by the quarterback. Michigan doesn't know how to attack that very well. Like, maybe they can, maybe they will, but it's like, have we seen it yet? Like, have we seen them have that kind of attack where they're trusting their quarterback's athleticism on the edge, except for, the occasional bluff read or arc read, whatever we want to call it. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to jam that middle, and they'd like to bring down Dylan Rosiak. They like to bring down their linebackers, and they'll give you man-to-man opportunities. So I think Michigan is going to have to show early on in this game that Colston Loveland can beat Matthew Bailey, that that Jack Tuttle is willing to keep it and go outside. Remember last game, Michigan started to get up because they were getting Corum bouncing they got them to step down, and then Corum would have a crazy bounce on Duo and get outside and got a chunk of yards. And they were on track to do that until they lost Blake Corum. So the other way I could see them winning this game, and you saw this against Purdue as well, is just a big crack for Donovan Edwards, right? Like one of those plays because they're going to step down. They are going to react hardcore to Michigan's running game, more than any other team they face probably. And when they do that, you're creating opportunities to break a tackle, to jump outside, to test one of these guys, even if they are technically covering the edge, and bounce around him and out-athlete them. And I think that's where Michigan can get a lot of yards.
Alex?
I think one other thing I wanted to bring up, this is a point for the offense, but also defense to some degree. I think Illinois is going to be ready for this game. And I think that's something offensively, I think they're going to probably have some things prepared. Bert is still salty about that call from 2 years ago. I know Ryan Walters is salty about sign stealing. He's not here anymore, but probably somewhat pervasive in his old program. And you look at Illinois' schedule this year, they went to Nebraska, they went to Penn State. This is their big home game. They go to Oregon the week after. They're probably looking at that as more of a schedule loss.
Oh, they scheduled this 20 years. They scheduled this thing 5 years ago. No, something they brought to the Big Ten. I was talking with Dooley about this recently. They sent to the Big Ten because their biggest game in history was when they killed Michigan at home in the 1920s. And this is the 100-year anniversary of that. And they're going to be in special uniforms for it. They asked for this game when they put the schedule together. And then when they redid the schedule, their first question was, do not move that Michigan game.
This is going to be a big game for them. So I think they're going to be fired up. You also throw in the weird college basketball COVID season win percentage Big Ten championship. There's a lot of beef now between Michigan and Illinois. They like to think they're our rivals now.
You are so young, Alex. you don't know this has been going on for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Oh, my sweet summer child.
They even mentioned 8 Train's fumble, right?
All right. We gotta get to a commercial break. Breaking news. Winters Grady is Michigan's first commit of the 2026 basketball class. Good get, Dusty May. Let's hit that commercial break.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives diehard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing homes simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenient stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service. I can't believe I'm doing this. If you find yourself in the penalty box, you want a Michigan man arguing your case, call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul tonight. It's 248-924-9458. Or visit his old website at michiganlawgrad.com.
Yeah. It's that champion sound, you know? You done been through some shit. Ain't too proud of my past, for sure ain't ashamed of it. I'm just somewhere in between and don't know the name of it, yeah.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.6. This is the time on Sprockets where we talk about the UFR, but I had some major sleep issues this week, so I didn't actually get mine done. I apologize to the readership. We're working on it. Gonna go see the old doctor about it and try not to have insomnia. It's the stupidest thing, because you try to go to sleep and you're just like, I'm wasting all my time not being asleep, and then in the day you sleep. It's bad. But anyway, Seth, what did you find out?
So the secondary was worse than we actually realized.
Okay.
I mean, it looked like a disaster, right? Like, we walked out of there going, oh no, like Jair Hill doesn't know what the heck he's doing, and Zeke Berry had the worst game in the history of UFR.
I saw that. Like, what? How? I mean, I know that the whole post is like, this is how, but
yeah.
I want you to explain to the listenership this.
Well, maybe it was the field, but he was the one more than anybody else who seemed to like need to take 4 steps to stop himself from moving. And a lot of his job is catch the fast guy in space. And a lot of Washington's offense was Giles Jackson's already standing put. Throw the ball to him. Zeke Berry can't tackle him, or they do, or their running backs coming out of the backfield. Zeke Berry can't change direction, completely whiffs, and then it's a lot of space. Or there were some things where like I'm giving him -1s where I was like originally thinking that he's supposed to have -2s, where Jair Hill's completely left alone in all the space, and you're like, well, how is this supposed to work? Well, if it's cover 3, the nickel is supposed to come off as soon as the guy goes inside and back out and be in his zone. And he's just like taking the slot all the way to the linebacker when he's got a safety above him too. So there's like no reason for him to be there. Now
how consistently is he doing that, right?
Well, he does that too much the first time. The second time he does seem like he's trying to snap back, but he's too late. And the third time he's just misaligned, and then he's like running back and his back is turned and they hit it anyway. So there's a touchdown where, the quarterback's throwing to the back corner. Mason Graham almost gets him down. And it's basically just a chuck to the corner and hoping my receiver can go up and get it. And Zeke Berry just doesn't know where the ball is. And he turns around and he's just completely, he turns on the inside and the ball goes on the outside and he can't find the ball. And we grade results. So some of it was just results based. We also grade, I can't say the field. I had to credit the players of the field. I'm not going to be like, field, -1, right? Like, there's no way for me to tell. Or cleats, -2, right? So I think there was some of that too. And we just got to have to admit, though, he is not Mikey Samer still. And I think a lot of the things they were doing, the cover 3 thing was an example. I think that there's switches. You see them communicating before the play with Jair Hill, and they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. When you have both those guys on the same side, you have 2 guys who are Michigan's least seniorific players involved in all these coverages, right? And I think that's what's probably happening, is that what Michigan has, if you see this, do this, but if you see this, it might have to be this, and you communicate before the play of what you guys think based off of their alignment. And I think when you had Mikey Samer still, immediately there was somebody who said, this guy's doing here, right? Let's do this. Let's do a chop. You'd see all these calls before the play, and there would always be all this communication. I don't think that either one of these guys is anywhere close to Mikey Samer still, and that's what we're seeing. That this defense, the way they want to run it, is supposed to have these super intelligent guys who can make NFL pre-snap calls, and if they can't, then the whole structure falls apart.
I mean, it's hard to determine like how much of this is like a problem with Zeke Berry and how much is that Zeke Berry is being asked to be Mike Sainristil immediately, right? And it's just I feel like, if you simplify things, then maybe you'll get more consistent results here. But this is a conversation we've had over and over again.
I mean, we saw it in this game, Hank. There's one more piece I wanted to throw there, because what they did to solve this problem out of the same alignments is when they wanted to go man, they just brought Jair Hill in the second half. They brought Jair Hill down and had him go and press. and suddenly that quick pass is not there, and we actually pick up a couple sacks. So I think that it might just be a wink thing too, that like he doesn't want to declare what is. The whole idea is let's not show what we're going to be. But some of these guys, that's the trade-off you're going to have to make.
Well, in lieu of talking about the offense, which would probably be, more of the same. Winters Grady just committed. He is a 6'5" wing who Michigan sort of pried away from a couple of other teams that were supposed to be leaders. He's in the sweet spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's 6'5". He's a guy who is an excellent shooter. Shot 53, 42, 87 on EYBL this year. And here is the best scouting report. He's a good, not great athlete.
Not quite NBA, but
right.
But not so bad that you're going to get exploited by every single
Good size for a shooter, a guy who sounds a lot like Isaiah Livers. They like his mid-range game, which was an Isaiah Livers specialty in high school. But obviously he's got 3-point range and he's a dead eye from the line, and that 53%, if it does have a lot of that mid-range in there, he could be one of those unicorns where he takes that mid-range jumper. I'm like, okay. So excellent pickup for Dusty May. Not his first pickup at Michigan, but it kind of feels like this is his first class where he's building it from the ground up as part of, not just picking off random guys that he gets access to late in the cycle. So he's picked up Winters Grady, and Michigan is sort of the perceived leader for both Trey McKinney and Xavion Stanton. So if they get those three guys, that's a point guard, a wing / shooting guard, and a guy who might be the best shot blocker in America.
Yeah.
And all of those guys seem like multi-year college players. So a very encouraging start to his first recruiting class.
The McKinney thing is interesting because first of all, this helps them with McKinney because those guys are friends and those guys have been on the circuit together. So picking up one suggests that Michigan might have the inside track now for McKinney. McKinney, sorry. The other thing about McKinney is that we're seeing an interesting thing start to happen now in the rankings where a guy is worth more if he's going to stay in college longer, right? So
yeah,
he's been kind of slowly creeping up, even though his NBA profile hasn't. And it used to be like your ranking was like your NBA draft position.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's necessarily happening yet. I feel like most of the graders are like, you know what, we're going to be graded on? We're going to be graded on NBA draft location first and foremost. And so it's going to be hard to kind of pry them off of that, because if you're like, oh, well, Hunter Dickinson was a really good college player, and that's why we ranked him 5th in the nation. People are like, but he's not an NBA player. I just kind of feel like as a recruit, if you're talking about college impact, Hunter Dickinson shouldn't have been 50th, right? He should have been
that's
top 10.
That's what we're talking about with McKinney, because ESPN just bumped him to 16. Now, as far as an NBA prospect for his class, he looks like one of those guys in the 40 to 50s, right? Like, he's a good player, but he's probably like maybe 30s.
I guess that depends on your perspective. He's not a slam dunk guy who's obviously going to be a top 5 pick, but maybe Matt D has one opinion of him and maybe ESPN has a different opinion. I don't think that those are necessarily diverging because it's like this guy's going to be a second-year college player. I think it's just different opinions of his talent. But in any case, Dusty May has yet to put a foot wrong. Michigan starts off this weekend with an exhibition against Oakland, which will be a first opportunity to see an almost entirely new team in action. And I'm looking forward to it because anything could happen.
Yeah.
All right, guys. It's been an interesting podcast. Thanks to Jordan Acker for coming on and allowing me to harangue him for decisions he did not make, which is always a sign of a kind and upstanding individual. We'll probably have another conversation with him later down the road when the future of the athlete department is in better focus. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
She makes a vodka, makes it all night long. She makes a